It's a lot of people like we fight with managers.
You have to be your best for everyone, but never to yourself.
The name of the game is Fuck Them. The Geto Boys gave us some of the most raw and honest music in hip-hop history. But the real story is that this legendary group, Scarface, Willie D, and the late Bushwick Bill, hated almost everyone around them, not just their rivals, but former members, mentors, and even each other. The deep, dark truth of this group is that their success was actually driven by a constant, intense conflict. The Geto Boys were pioneers from Houston, Texas, defining Southern hip-hop with unflinching narratives about inner-city violence and psychological struggles. The classic lineup was assembled by Rap-A-Lot impresario Jay Prince after the original iteration failed. But from the very beginning, this wasn't a brotherhood. This was a volatile studio creation that succeeded because of chaos, not despite it. Scarface provided dark, introspective lyricism. Bushwick Bill contributed the shock value and comic relief, and Willie D delivered the aggressive, politically charged viewpoints. On paper, it was the perfect formula. In reality, it was a powder keg waiting to explode. Let's start with the most recent betrayal. In 2023, Scarface performed the group's biggest hit, Mind Playing Tricks on Me, at a Grammys hip-hop tribute. Willie D was not included and went public, saying he felt beyond slighted. He argued that because Scarface performed a Geto Boys track, one Willie D co-wrote and had a verse on, he should have been there. Scarface's cold response was that he performs as Scarface, his successful solo identity, and doesn't want his name intertwined with the Geto Boys. He even said if Willie D didn't get the call, it wasn't his fault. Willie D called Scarface a selfish person for not thinking to include him. This Grammy situation perfectly captures everything wrong with the Geto Boys dynamic. Here you have two men who created one of hip-hop's most iconic tracks together, and they can't even coordinate a tribute performance without turning it into a public dispute. The fact that Scarface prioritized his solo brand over acknowledging his group's legacy speaks volumes. Willie D's frustration wasn't just about being excluded from a performance. It was about decades of feeling undervalued by a partner who seemed more interested in distancing himself from the group than celebrating what they built together. This wasn't a solo show. This was a Grammy tribute to hip-hop's 50th anniversary, a moment that should have been about honoring the collective legacy, not individual egos. The professional tensions between Willie D and Scarface continued even after Bushwick Bill's death, illustrating the lasting difficulty in disentangling the success of the individual brands from the collective legacy. Willie D viewed Scarface's performance of a signature group song as a collective victory, demanding his inclusion, while Scarface prioritized reinforcing the professional distance he maintained from the group structure. This betrayal is just the latest sign that the group was always unstable. It makes you wonder if they ever had a real friend in the business. If you want to dive deeper into the chaos behind music legends, you need to subscribe right now, hit that button, and join the channel. Also, comment below, based on the Grammy situation, which member do you think is the most selfish? The biggest, longest running beef was between Scarface and Lil Troy, a fellow Houston rapper. The conflict spanned over 15 years, starting around 2000. This feud was especially ironic because Lil Troy was an early mentor who helped the 16-year-old Scarface get into the studio for the first time in 1988. Think about that for a second. The man who gave Scarface his first real opportunity in music became his most bitter enemy for over a decade. That's a complete betrayal of the mentorship that launched his entire career. The beef started over a financial dispute about Scarface's alleged unauthorized use of Lil Troy's vocals on an album, which led to Scarface paying a reported $220,000. Scarface then sued Lil Troy for the unauthorized use of his vocals. Already, you can see how petty this was becoming. Two grown men, both successful in their own right, fighting over vocal samples and money like children fighting over toys. The dispute exploded when Scarface and the Geto Boys publicly alleged that Lil Troy was a police informant, a snitch. Lil Troy countersued Scarface for $2 million for defamation of character over these claims. In the hardcore rap world, calling someone a snitch is the most severe professional and social penalty, far worse than a money issue. Lil Troy said the goal was to kill his character and career legitimacy. This wasn't just about winning an argument. This was about destroying a man's entire reputation in the industry where street credibility is everything. The transformation of the dispute from a financial issue into a moral assassination attempt demonstrates the strategic use of street credibility as a weapon. The label informant carries the maximum social and professional penalty, far exceeding the impact of the initial monetary claim. The Geto Boys then used their platform for lyrical warfare, explicitly targeting Lil Troy on the track G-Code. The lyrics confirmed Scarface targeted Lil Troy, calling him a mouse and alleging, "Now you showing up in court testifying for the state." There was an older personal element too. Scarface was angry because Lil Troy had supposedly favored another local rapper's song over Scarface's first single. So we're talking about grudges that went back decades, petty slights that Scarface never forgot and never forgave. Lil Troy had legal troubles, serving an 18-month prison sentence for a drug conviction in the early 2000s. Lil Troy claimed the entire feud was orchestrated by Rap-A-Lot founder Jay Prince and others around Scarface because they could never control me financially. This makes the 15-year beef seem more like a calculated struggle for dominance in the Houston market than a personal grudge. They turned a business dispute into character assassination, weaponizing street codes to destroy a former mentor's reputation. The snitch allegations weren't about truth or justice. They were about power, control, and eliminating competition. This suggests the lengthy beef was fundamentally a struggle for dominance between the powerful Rap-A-Lot label, using Scarface as the lyrical instrument, and Lil Troy's Shortstop Records. It is important to understand the political context behind this sustained animosity, which reveals how serious label and monetary disputes could be maliciously escalated through the weaponization of street codes to achieve market control and destroy a rival's character. The next target of professional contempt was a temporary group member, Big Mike. Big Mike was brought in from 1992 to 1994 when Willie D first left the group for a solo career in boxing. Mike was featured prominently on the gold-selling album Till Death Do Us Part. The album's lead-off track, Geto, was specifically utilized as a hard-hitting introduction to signal Big Mike's attempt to fill the significant vacuum left by Willie D. But Big Mike was instantly branded a temporary replacement without legitimacy. From day one, he was set up to fail. Despite his presence, even contemporaneous industry observations often characterized Big Mike as merely a replacement Geto Boy, suggesting an inherent lack of legitimacy or permanency in his role. Scarface later sealed this professional dismissal with a brutal public comment. Scarface said that Big Mike's nuts were never up to the task of filling out Willie D's jockstrap. This was a crushing insult, institutionalizing the idea that Mike was an inadequate vessel for Willie D's role as the group's political thinker and loud dude. This wasn't constructive criticism. This was humiliation, pure and simple. Mike ultimately served as a scapegoat whose failure reinforced the idea that the classic trio was irreplaceable. Big Mike tried his best to contribute to a gold-selling album, and his reward was to be publicly emasculated by Scarface years later. This brutal language functioned as a categorical assessment that established the non-negotiable standard required of the classic Geto Boys lineup. Willie D was defined as the loud dude and political thinker whose aggressive, confrontational presence was essential to balance Scarface's introspection and Bushwick Bill's psychological narratives. By linking Big Mike's perceived failure to Willie D's physical stature and capacity, Scarface implied a failure of professional weight and command rather than simple lyrical deficiency. These feuds expose how fractured the group was. The classic lineup itself was strained, with Willie D's first departure in 1992 being driven by the fact he didn't want to be around Bushwick Bill, a feeling he said was mutual. Willie D also revealed the core members didn't even really speak in between shows. Scarface even once said they were not friends, not cool. This chronic instability drove their music, but also tore the group apart. The very tension that made their music so raw and authentic was the same tension that made it impossible for them to function as a unit. Even while absent from the group, Willie D maintained that he was cool with Scarface and talking regularly. This dynamic illustrates that Scarface and Willie D maintained a functional, mutual respect, but the group structure itself, centered on Bushwick Bill's volatility, was professionally unsustainable for long periods. artists. The Geto Boys' creative success occurred despite their dysfunction, requiring periods of separation for the survival of the individual members. The final two rappers who earned the Geto Boys' hatred were MC Lyte and Tupac Shakur. These were not traditional beefs, but an internal dismissal by Willie D, who recently admitted he had been critical and dismissive of them both. Willie D said he was hating on their music early in their careers out of arrogance and a sense of gatekeeping because he viewed his own music as superior. Willie D demonstrated an unusual degree of intellectual honesty by admitting that he had previously been critical and dismissive of certain rappers, explicitly stating he was hating on MC Lyte and Tupac Shakur early in their careers. His harshest criticism was aimed at Tupac, who he initially dismissed as an actor attempting to infiltrate the hip-hop world. This judgment came from Tupac's past as a dancer for Digital Underground and his film acting. This ideological stance was about protecting the authentic street purity of the hardcore rap genre that Southern artists like the Geto Boys were fighting to establish. To Willie D, a person coming from an acting or professional dancing background was an opportunistic threat to the required grit. Willie D had a history of aggression and confrontation, having won a Golden Gloves championship and been expelled from high school for fighting. But this wasn't really about authenticity. This was about ego and insecurity, about Willie D feeling threatened by anyone who might challenge the Geto Boys' position. This severe critique reflects the fierce regionalism and intense gatekeeping that characterized early 1990s hip-hop. Southern artists were fighting for national legitimacy against industry resistance and censorship, and were deeply critical of artists perceived as inorganic or polished. The story of the Geto Boys is a non-stop, toxic cycle of conflict. The internal chaos between Willie D and Bushwick Bill and the post-mortem disputes over recognition proved that friction was essential to their music. They used vicious personal attacks, like the snitch allegations against Lil Troy and the brutal professional dismissal of Big Mike, as weapons to control the market and defend their image. The group was so dysfunctional that even the final tour, planned before Bushwick Bill's death, was marred by a dispute over its name, with Bill publicly airing grievances and fearing the group was exploiting his cancer. Bill objected strongly to the tour being named The Beginning of a Long Goodbye, believing that the name exploited his cancer diagnosis. Although Willie D was able to convince Bill that the name was not related to his illness, Bill later became defiant and insisted on renaming the tour Fake Cancer, continuing to publicly air his grievances. Even facing death, there was no peace, no unity, just more conflict and mistrust. The chaos was real, and it was constant. The mistrust suggests Bill feared the group or its management was attempting to capitalize financially on his terminal illness. But even in this world of bitterness, some healing did happen. Despite their 15-year feud that involved lawsuits and public attacks, Scarface and Lil Troy eventually resolved their differences. The feud ultimately concluded around 2016, with Lil Troy confirming that he and Scarface communicate regularly. Lil Troy confirmed they have ended the beef and now talk every week, saying, "Face is my people." This resolution only happened once Scarface gained professional independence, suggesting the political and label drama, not true personal hate, was fueling the conflict. Lil Troy credits this to Scarface's professional freedom, noting he's independent now. He's so happy now. This strongly supports the idea that entrenched label politics and the struggle for financial control, rather than genuine personal enmity, fueled the prolonged conflict. Willie D also had an intellectual change of heart about Tupac. He admitted that after Tupac released his second album, he realized, oh yeah, this dude is the real deal. Willie D's eventual respect was earned by Tupac's lyrical skill and ability to go deeper with his self-expression. This evolution demonstrates that even the most stringent ideological gatekeepers eventually had to acknowledge undeniable lyrical craft. The criteria for this shift was based on Tupac's profound capacity for self-expression, citing his ability to go deeper into what I want to say as validation of his lyrical skill. The Geto Boys are one of the most raw and influential groups in hip-hop history. The paradox of their legacy is that the music was so good precisely because the drama was so real. They captured the volatile, messy environment. They navigated better than anyone. Their art was the authentic reflection of the chaos. The ability to translate such deep, shared psychological dysfunction and chaos into raw, realistic narratives depended on this intense, necessary friction. The confrontational, raw nature of the music was intimately linked to the highly volatile professional and personal relationships among the core members. If you appreciate the kind of brutal honesty that only Scarface and the Geto Boys could deliver, make sure you like this video and share it with a friend who loves classic hip hop. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.